This is a Building Resilience podcast, episode 184, Boost Your Learning Power. Welcome to Building Resilience, a podcast where theory, practical strategies, and inspiring stories show you how to unlock your best life. I'm your host, Leah Davidson. As a certified life coach, speech-language pathologist, and nervous system resilience expert, it is my mission to teach you how to be more resilient to life's adversities. I will show you how to manage your mind, befriend your nervous system, process your emotions, and even eliminate stress. It's time to do more than just survive. It's time to thrive. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Building Resilience Podcast. As you are aware, every once in a while, I like to talk about some things related to memory. Since as a speech-language pathologist working in the area of traumatic brain injury, I have spent a lot of time dealing with memory issues. So today, we're going to be talking about some strategies to boost your learning power and really enhance your learning and your memory retention. So this will be especially relevant to you if you're a student or if you are a parent of kids who are students, because we are going to be looking a little bit closer to studying and learning and making the most of your brain's incredible capabilities. So the first thing to put on the table is the acknowledgement that stress, both acute and chronic, acute meaning very specific event and chronic meaning sort of over a longer period of time, interferes with memory. So in order for us to be learning effectively and efficiently, we do want to try to reduce the amount of stress in our lives, the number of stressors in our life that lead to that physiological response of stress in our body. So you can go back and listen to my episodes on stress reduction, where we talk about doing as much as possible to limit the number of stressors on your plate. And then also the episode on stress resilience, where we learn how to actually reframe things. Now, either way, we just need to acknowledge that stressors in our life and how we respond to those stressors, we need to make sure that we are doing something to help us release the stress, to complete the stress cycle on a daily basis that I've talked about before. We kind of need to blow off the steam, so to speak. We need to release the built up energy in our body that's due to the everyday stressors or the chronic buildup of stress that we have. So to do that, things like exercise can be a game changer. Not only does it help you deal with stress and complete the stress cycle, but it also increases blood flow to your brain, which is really crucial for creating and retaining memories. So one of the best things you can do as you're getting ready to learn new information or to study, or even before you attend long meetings, maybe you're at a conference or have an all-day event, or you're taking a training or a certification. If you're in my advanced training, you know how extensive and intensive it is, so listen up. Before diving into new information, it is a good idea to get active, to engage in some cardio activity that can prime your brain for learning. For example, taking a brisk walk or doing a quick run can really make a significant difference in how well you absorb the new information. Studies have actually shown that physical activity enhances cognitive functions and overall will help improve memory. And of course, that means that taking exercise breaks can also be really important while you're learning. This is why it's crucial that children have physical activity during the day. Please do not keep them in from recess or not let them run around at lunch. They need that time to burn off energy and to prime their brain for learning. It's also good to be aware that some people learn better when they are moving. I know I used to walk around when I was studying, so movement is good. Now, I know this can be challenging in a class setting, so if you require everyone to be seated, then you must also allow for people to be walking around every once in a while too. So the first tip for active learning is move. Get active. It releases the stress, it increases blood flow, it primes your brain, it prevents fatigue and boredom. There's so many benefits to getting active. Now, the second tip I have for you to enhance your memory and your learning is to create a learning environment. You really want to have a consistent learning space or a consistent routine that can signal to your brain that it is time to focus. And maybe there's a certain spot in your home where you feel most productive. Maybe it is a desk or a table. I know with my kids, I used to have them work at the dining room table because we live in a downtown home. There's not a ton of space, so the kids didn't have desks in their rooms. So the dining room table became like the study hall. Stay away from the bed. Because if you are working in the bed, then your brain will start associating work with bed, and we don't want that for our sleep. We want our brain to associate our bed with sleep. Really, the only activities you should be doing in bed is sleeping and anything involving intimacy. So you will want to make sure that your learning environment has some level of consistency. You also want to make sure that it is free of distractions. So if you have your phone or computer, then turn off notifications. Also have all your materials ready. Make sure you have what you need: calculator, pens, paper, certain resources. And you'll also want to check in for things like the temperature and the lighting. And of course, taking care of any immediate needs like getting a snack or using a bathroom. Another thing that could be a cute trick to use is have something that you only have during study time. So maybe it is a certain glass where you hold a drink, or maybe it is a certain hat that you're going to wear. Maybe it's a certain pen or pencil that you use. We want these objects, they can be associated to your brain with learning and with focus and with paying attention. So then consistently using them will be really helpful when the time comes to execute the information. The next thing you can do is preview the material. So you've done some exercise and have been active. You've set up the environment for success. And now, before jumping right into the new information, we're going to do a little preview. You're going to look first at reviewing what you already know, because this helps set the stage for your brain, linking new information to existing information. That's really the goal. That's the whole goal of learning, taking what you're learning now and linking it to something that you already know. So think of this as giving your brain like a sneak peek of what's to come. For example, if you're studying a new language, you may start by reviewing the vocabulary that you've already learned before adding new words to your repertoire. I like to use the example of going to a restaurant. When you walk into a restaurant, you are handed a menu. And I don't think too many people open up the menu and start reading from the first page all the details and words. The thing that you usually do is you usually open up the menu and you just kind of peruse the menu. What kind of food do they have? You look at the different sections. Do they have sandwiches? What are their main dishes? What kind of desserts even they have? You're giving your brain a little bit of an overview. After you've given a little bit of an overview, then you may go back to the beginning and start looking in more details to see what jumps out at you. But rarely do you do that from the beginning. The brain likes to be primed. It likes to know what it is about to do. And it wants to be able to pull up information that it already has existing knowledge so that it can be ready to learn new things and link them together. So priming your brain by previewing is super important. So now you've reviewed. What's next? Well, the next thing we're going to talk about when we dive in is we're going to look at some very specific strategies. There are a lot of different strategies you can use, but I'm going to give you some of the most common ones that are most effective. What is important here is to now take small chunks and start, and know that most of the time it's going to require a lot of repetition. One of the most effective techniques for memory retention is repetition. So repeat, repeat, repeat. By going over the same material multiple times, you're strengthening those neural pathways, making the information much easier to retrieve later on. And I would also encourage you, if possible, to repeat and recite the information out loud. When you do it out loud, what happens is it engages multiple parts of your brain: visual, auditory, and motor functions. For example, if you're trying to remember a speech, practice saying it out loud repeatedly. Or if you're trying to see how well you understand something, then try to explain it out loud. Or even better, try to teach it to somebody out loud. Now, the next technique that can be really helpful is something called staggered rehearsal or spaced retrieval. There's lots of different names for this technique. Basically, what it is instead of cramming everything all at once, what you're going to do is you're going to space out your study sessions. You're going to space out how you learn something. Initially, you might review the information kind of after short intervals. So I'll learn something and then like 30 seconds later, I'll try to pull it back up and maybe a minute later, and then gradually increase these intervals. So after half an hour, after 3 hours, after 12 hours, the next day, 3 days, and so forth. And what this does is it helps consolidate the information into long-term memory. Think of it like you're watering a plant regularly rather than like flooding it all at once. Or for yourself, think of it as you having to drink a bunch of water. It's much easier to take sips throughout the day than trying to chug liters at a time at the end of the day. So this is why they talk about cramming is not the best way to study. And they really encourage, study experts really encourage you to go home, review your notes after class, and review them frequently because it really helps with that consolidation of information. Now, speaking of notes, note-taking is actually another great way to learn things. Now, I know that if I'm at a conference, it doesn't matter if they give me all the slides, all the exact notes. I will still take my own, even if I never look at them again. The reason I'm taking notes is really to help with the memory retention. Taking notes also can really help you stay focused, pay attention, and then the act of actually writing helps reinforce the information. If you want to learn something, it can also be beneficial to just literally write it all out. Remember being back in elementary school and getting spelling words, and you had to write each spelling word out 5 times? That is the power of repetition and writing. So take notes, write things out, again, using many modalities to help your brain out. Another great tip is to turn information into stories. So to tell a story with the information that you're trying to learn, it can be a serious story, it can be a silly story. Sometimes adding humor can work really well. Telling stories not only makes the information more meaningful, but it also makes it easier to remember. That is also why if you're trying to teach something to somebody, tell stories. Stories get people's attention. It gets our brains on the same wavelength, and it's much easier to remember a story. So create stories for yourself, create them for others. They can be real, they can be made up. For example, if you're learning historical events, try to create a narrative or a story around them. And associations also play a crucial role. So you want to link new information with what you already know. For example, this is associated with this, which is connected to this, and this can be combined in our storytelling as we link things together. So this is why we then start always with a review, because it primes our brain for making all these connections, all these associations that we've already planted the seeds for. Now, the next tip is to test yourself. Ask yourself questions or even have somebody quiz you. Again, this is where writing things out, explaining concepts in your own words, and teaching others can really reinforce your understanding. For example, after you study a chapter, write a summary or explain the key points to a friend or quiz your kids. I always had a few kids who wanted me to quiz them all the time before tests. And this can be a benefit of studying and learning together as well. When I was in university, I always had a group of friends that I studied with. And even in my advanced training of nervous system resilience, I put people in small groups and give them a guide with questions that they can answer, that they can talk about. Really, it's to test their comprehension and to help them discuss it together, because I know that those discussions are really going to help consolidate that information. But even if you're on your own, writing things out, speaking out loud, even writing things on a whiteboard, make up questions for yourself to answer can be super helpful. Lastly, the technique that I want to offer to you is something called the Pomodoro Technique. And it will help you learn in small chunks because your brain wants to learn in small chunks. Your brain doesn't want to get saturated. I sort of think of like a maximum capacity it hits, almost like filling a water jug. There's a maximum capacity before it spills over. So the Pomodoro technique helps you keep it into small chunks. Now, I think that the maximum recommended big chunk of time to learn is about 90 minutes. But if you can, you probably want to break it down into something a little bit smaller. So this technique, called the Pomodoro Technique, it's a great strategy to use. Basically, it helps you divide up your study time or your work time, your focus time, and break time. Now, it's called Pomodoro because of that little traditional tomato timer that you would use in the kitchen to set. It was a technique developed in the 80s by Francesco Cirillo. The tomato timer was what he used in his studies. So basically, what you do is you do focused work or study in blocks of about 20, 25 minutes. And then you take a short break for about 5 to 10 minutes. Now, after 2 to 4 rounds, depending on your tolerance, you take a longer break of 20 to 30 minutes. Now, during the breaks, you want to switch around what tasks you're doing, switching from cognitive to physical activities. So stepping outside, stretching, grabbing a drink of water. Now, the alteration between physical and cognitive can help keep your brain fresh. So if you're doing something that is really cognitive, you do want to make sure that your break is focused on physical. If you're doing something physical, then your break can be focused on something more cognitive. And you're probably going to want to play around with the length of time for you. Some people really need short focus times. Like many of my clients who have experienced a traumatic brain injury, they will need a shorter period of time. But sometimes what can happen is if the focus time is too short, you feel like you get nothing done or you get on a roll and it gets interrupted. So you'll have to play around. But the idea is chunking the study focus time with the break time and alternating those back and forth. Overall, what you see is you end up getting a lot more done during a certain period of time. Now let's talk about what to do post-learning. One of the things we want to do is we want to try to get an adrenaline boost. And this is very effective because adrenaline can help with consolidating memories. So after a focused learning time or a studying time, activities like going for a run or doing a quick sprint or even having some cold water exposure, splashing cold water on your face or even taking a cold shower can be effective. Now, these methods, they probably sound a bit unconventional, but they really can enhance your memory retention. Now, obviously, you need to be mindful of your own overall health and consult with a doctor if needed, but boosting your adrenaline can be very helpful. Now, you're leveraging the power of exercise to boost your adrenaline, but you don't want to underestimate the power of sleep, because proper sleep is where much of the brain's consolidation actually happens. So short power naps or even non-sleep deep rest, which we've talked about before, it can be very beneficial. Now, non-sleep deep rest is a concept that was popularized by neuroscientist Dr. Andrew Huberman, and it really involves resting deeply without actually sleeping, which helps in mental recovery. Another word for it can be yoga nidra. So you can look that up on YouTube, either one, non-sleep deep rest or yoga nidra. I should probably do a whole podcast episode on these concepts, which I'll do in the future, but look them up for now. Basically, after an intense time focusing, you want to have some of that rest time. So you could just take a short power nap. This is really my go-to. I love to do non-sleep deep rest during the day. I find it so relaxing. I can actually feel the information. It sounds bizarre, but I can feel it start to settle in my brain. I don't try to sleep, but I just try to relax. Sometimes I do fall asleep, so make sure you set an alarm. But it is a great way to start getting the information digested, so to speak. Now, meditation is another tool for improving memory and cognitive function. I think the newest studies are suggesting that even 13 to 15 minutes a day is a good amount of time for a minimum of 8 weeks that you'll start to notice the benefits. Meditation is not only great for stress and your mental health, but it is for enhancing memory as well. It can be done in the morning, it can be done in the evening, it can be done during the day, whatever works for you. So that is a snippet into maximizing your learning retention. You want to exercise regularly and be active prior to your focus time. You want to establish a consistent learning environment. You want to review prior knowledge. You want to use repetition and reciting things. You want to use techniques like spaced retrieval, tell stories, make associations. You want to test yourself, use the Pomodoro Technique, and then you want to boost adrenaline after studying and prioritize your sleep and rest. If you found this episode helpful, please make sure that you're subscribed to the Building Resilience podcast. And I would also love it if you could leave a review and share it with anybody else who you think might benefit. Until next time, keep learning and stay curious. Have a great week. Thank you for listening to the Building Resilience podcast. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about managing stress, building resilience, and leading a more purposeful life, then make sure we're connected on Instagram and Facebook at Leah Davidson Life Coaching. You can also subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.leahdavidsonlifecoaching.com/newsletter. Looking forward to connecting.